Hi everyone, it's Tom here, and I've been working at Horizon One Recruitment for about 2.5 years, and I specialise in office and administrative support. So today I'm going to be presenting CV tips and tricks, just some ways that you can improve your CV. And so I guess the main reason I'm presenting this particular section is because I work with graduates more so than most people at Horizon One. And a lot of those graduates or anyone will just come to me to ask how they can improve their CV. So I guess this is just an overall summary of kind of what I've learnt about your CV over the past 2.5 years. So yeah, just a quick outline of what I'll be covering today. Now they all cross over one another, but I guess it's just a bit of a structure to follow. So the first slide, I'll be talking about structuring your CV for the most impact. Secondly, I'll be looking at what to include in your CV, but also what not to include in your CV. And then I'll just be wrapping it up quickly with the final slide. So presenting the authentic you. So just really looking at the main things employers are looking for when they see your CV for the first time. So yeah, let's get into it. I'll just share my screen and bring up the slideshow. So hopefully that's come up. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so first of all, looking at the structure of your CV. So I'll just be going through 5 points on the structure. So first point, using subheadings. Now, these are very important just to kind of lay out that information nice and easy for the employer to see. So I guess the main subheadings that I'd say to include in your CV that they all should have. So first of all, personal details, then a summary / overview, your professional skills, your education, your work history / employment, and then any other qualifications that you might have. So, for example, like what you'd put in other qualifications, like your driver's license or a bronze medallion, those sorts of things. So yeah, that's subheading is just easy to include that information, makes it easy to read. Yeah, you can see there, Tony Stark has his subheadings there. So secondly, the next point for tips on structure is using dot points to relay your information onto your CV. Yeah, you can see there under professional skills, dot points, employment history. It's most useful when it comes to employment history when there's a lot of information to cover. So I guess dot points really, they're good at summarizing that information. They get rid of a lot of words that you might not necessarily need and that can kind of clunk up your style of writing. They make it punchy, as I said, easy to read, easy for that information to be accessed. I guess my tip on when using dot points for your employment history, I'd say use between about 5 and 10 dot points per work experience or job. Gives a good overview of what you're doing in that role. And then on to my next point. Now you can see in the light blue there. So this point probably isn't talked about as much when it comes to CV tips, but it's quite useful. So using action words, so pretty much verbs doing words throughout your CV. So I mean, these really paint a picture of what you were doing in a role when employers are looking at your CV. So you can see here, in the light blue, equipped, protect. Some other ones in there not highlighted, but developed, managed. Anything else? Yeah. So they're the main ones. But yeah, I mean, other examples. So created or built, supported. As I said, they're quite punchy. They engage the reader, I guess, a little bit more, and as I said, paint that picture of what you were doing in the role. So the next point is probably one of the biggest mistakes I see when graduates put in their CV for the first time or they haven't had much experience writing a CV. So listing your work experience, mainly when it comes to work experience, but also education, I guess, from your most recent to your least recent on your CV. So as again, you can see on this slide here, Tony Stark has his most recent experience on his CV, and his least recent experience last towards the bottom of the CV. This is because the role that you're applying for, your most relevant experience is likely going to be the experience that you're currently in or just been in, and it's also probably the most senior role you've been in. So the skill set's probably a lot higher level. So yeah, that's a big mistake I see with people. Just they'll put their first experience first in their CV, and then the most recent experience towards the bottom of their CV, which is going to be looked on last. So yeah, make sure you do that. And then the final point for this slide on the structure of your CV is the length of your CV. So also quite a common mistake, and it's, I guess, a bit of an old wives' tale. CVs can be over 2 or 3 pages long. They don't need to be, you don't need to keep it to 2 to 3 pages, can definitely be longer. I've got candidates that have put in CVs that are up to 10 pages long. Probably after 10 pages, probably a little bit long, but don't worry about restricting yourself to just that 2 or 3 pages, especially if you have a lot of experience. It's hard to summarize all your experience and skills in 2 pages. So yeah, don't worry about that. The best CVs I'd say are probably around 5, 6, 7 pages. Obviously, don't try and aim to get to 5, 6, 7 pages if you can't do that, but just don't worry about being restricted to 3 pages if you go a little bit over. Okay, so I'll just go on to my next slide now. So this is just looking at what's included in your CV, but also what not to include in your CV. So again, just another five tips for this slide. So first of all, make sure all your personal details are listed. So the main ones being your full name, your contact details, so email address, phone number, and also your working rights. So especially important if you've moved from overseas. And yeah, your working rights, or if your visa, or if you're a citizenship, your citizenship status, put that at the top of your CV. And then I think I had a question as well when it comes to your birth date. Yeah, you don't need to list your birth date. That's something that's not required on your CV. As I said, the main things: full name, contact details, working rights. There's been CVs I've seen where there's a little bit too much information put on there. I mean, you don't need to include every little personal detail about you. So I think someone's CV had their marital status on their CV. So not necessarily detrimental to the application, but it's just information that just isn't required. So yeah, just be mindful of that. So next, so make sure to list all your work experience. And don't leave any blanks. So I guess the biggest trap people might fall into is if they've been in a role where they, say a casual role working at McDonald's or Big W, they've been working a casual role but applying for their first corporate office role, they might not choose to put their experience working at the casual position. But I'd still say to include that because it shows that you were working, and it's better than leaving it blank on your CV, because if you leave something blank, employers are automatically thinking that you weren't working. So just make sure to include that experience. I mean, even with casual roles, you're still picking up skills that can be transferred to every job. So, I mean, your communication skills, dealing with difficult situations and high pressure environments, still relevant to roles that you're applying for. And then you can see just here on the right, when it says don't leave gaps. So say that you've traveled overseas for 6 months, and there's a bit of gap in your work experience. Just in that gap, just say that you were traveling overseas for 6 months. Like that's perfectly understandable. Again, it just kind of gets rid of any question marks on your CV. So yeah, just a one line, traveling overseas, perfectly fine. Okay, and next we'll just talk about the short summary slash overview. So yeah, just the summary. Not much of a summary there. I'm Iron Man. But the summary is more like I guess, an introduction to your CV. If you think of it more like an essay, it's the introduction to your essay. It's an introduction to your CV. So it's just a couple of paragraphs highlighting your skills and experiences, what you'd like to get into, and yeah, kind of like a condensed cover letter, I'd say. Summary, yeah, pretty important, I'd say, and quite helpful to an employer reading for the first time. And then next point, fourth point. So looking at your work experience, might not be super relevant to graduates, but still helpful to use later on. There's no need to include your work experience from more than 10 years ago. Employers probably wouldn't look past that date. So yeah, I mean, experience, say you've been working in a casual role 11 years ago and you were there for 6 months, there's no need to include that. It's been too long since you've worked there, and I mean, it's just not going to be really looked at. So yeah, you can get rid of that from your CV. If you'd like to include experience from more than 10 years ago, you can just list quick dot points of what those roles were and the time frame. But yeah, don't worry too much about that. And then finally, just looking at extra things to include on your CV. So you can include these subheadings if you want to, but also you don't feel like, I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to. Yeah, they can be put on there. So there in the bottom left corner, so interest slash hobbies, you can put that as a subheading. But more importantly, I guess what I'm referring to is the referee details. You don't need to include your referee's details on your CV, especially if you're sending it out to, if you're applying for 100 different roles, you don't want they might not want their CV, their referee details on your CV for those 100 different roles. I mean, they might be fine with that, so you can include that, but just don't feel like you need to include their details on your CV. Okay, so finally, we'll just go to our last slide. So this is what employers are looking for. So presenting the authentic you, just a quick summary, I guess. So first of all, the presentation of your CV, don't overcomplicate it. I've seen CVs where there's been just a lot of boxes all over the CV with the education here, professional skills here, work experience here. Just keep it nice and ordered. Yeah, and there's such thing as too many graphics and too much color. It can be just annoying to look at, I guess, if there's too much in one page. Feel free to include a little bit of color, but the main thing is just keeping it ordered and structured, like Tony Stark's CV here. And then final point. So your skill set, make sure, I mean, it might not be feasible to do, again, if you're applying 100 different roles, it might not be feasible to change your CV for each individual role. But if there is a position that you're particularly interested, look at the position description of the role that you're applying for, and then maybe see how you can tailor your CV to apply more to that position description. So, for example, if the role's advertised that you'll be coordinating a project within a team environment, look at your work experience and think of a time maybe that you've done that in that role, and include that in your CV. So you might have worked as part of a team to achieve something. Feel free to include that in your CV and your dot points when it comes to your work experience. So yeah, that's I guess an overall summary of what's included in your CV. So I mean, finally, just there in the bottom right. So if you're looking for CV examples, you can access the Horizon One website. There's a few tips and tricks up there as well. A little bit of what I covered today. And then there's also just multiple tools that you can use on Word. There's a resume tool that pops up. If you do Google, there's a lot of information on how to prepare a CV. Yeah, there's a lot to cover, but I guess they're the main tips I'd make when it comes to presenting your CV. I'll just stop sharing my screen. Yeah, cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming along. I hope that was useful. And yeah, have a good rest of your day, everyone. See you later.